Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Charles Haanel. This is the Master Key System Part 22. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of the Master Key System with Part 22. This part explains the cause of our present character, our present environment, our present ability, our present physical condition, and tells how we can make our future what we wish it to be. It explains how the vast panorama of nature is being constantly changed by simply changing the rate of vibration. It tells how the rate of vibration is being constantly changed in our bodies, usually unconsciously and often with detrimental and disastrous results. It tells how we may affect this change consciously and thus bring about only harmonious and salutary conditions. It explains that the law of health is based on the law of vibration, and that with a proper knowledge of the law we may externalize health conditions. It explains the operation of this law and how it is being more generally understood and appreciated, and how many physicians are now giving the matter their earnest attention. Alright, we are going to see what the law of health is. I do not believe that it is actually one of the laws, but we will see. If you don't know what I mean by one of the laws, there will be a video linked in the corner above, which is the 8 laws of creation. It is these 8 laws. The law of the one means that everything is the one. The law of momentum means that everything is in motion. The law of response says that there will be a response to an action. The law of returns tells what that response will be. The law of attraction states that like attracts like. The law of gender says that there is masculine and feminine in everything, and we are meant to balance them. The law of rhythm says that everything moves according to a pattern, and the law of purpose says that everything works for alignment whether or not you realize it. Introduction, Part 22. In Part 22, you will find that thoughts are spiritual seeds, which, when planted in the subconscious mind, have a tendency to sprout and grow, but unfortunately, the fruit is frequently not to our liking. The various forms of inflammation, paralysis, nervousness, and disease conditions, generally, are the manifestation of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, hatred, and similar thought. Can be a car wreck. That's what happened to me, right? I was injured through a car wreck, and I am affecting change on that through positive intentions, but it wasn't negative intentions necessarily that brought it about. The life processes are carried on by 2 distinct methods. Firstly, the taking up and making use of nutritive material necessary for constructing cells. Secondly, the secretion and excretion of the waste material. All life is based upon these constructive and destructive activities, and as food, water, and air are the only requisites necessary for the construction of cells, it would seem that the problem of prolonging life indefinitely would not be a very difficult one. You are not meant to prolong life indefinitely. That is one of the great problems that humanity has faced throughout history. The attempt to have immortality is dumb. You are not meant to be immortal. You are immortal, right? You, the individualized slice of divinity that pilots around this temple in 5D space, that part is immortal. It existed prior to your incorporation, and it will exist after your incorporation. You will go somewhere when you die. You can have debates about where that will be, but I believe that everybody returns to God. We are all going to go back to source, but pretty much everybody agrees, if they have spent any considerable amount of time thinking about it, that you are eternal. It is entirely foolish to try to prolong this particular physical incarnation past the point where it was supposed to be here. Once you get past a certain point, life's not even enjoyable that much anymore. You don't no longer get to go and do things, right? I've known a couple of people who lived past 100. They were not happy at the end. That is something that has been true and will be true all the way through history. We are put here for a purpose. That purpose is to learn lessons, and there are not a lot of lessons left at the end. You're not really going to catch it if you haven't caught it prior to. Does that mean that you should abandon health? Absolutely not. You should be taking the best care of your temple that you possibly can. You should be eating things that are conducive to life. You should not be eating things that are not conducive to life. You should be exercising regularly. You should be practicing prayer, fasting, and meditation. You should be thinking your positive thoughts. You should be doing all of the things that are healthy, because this is the temple. This is the temple of God. You have been given a temple to reside in. You're not the body. You're the soul. You're the part that makes the decisions for the body. So you should be taking care of your temple to the best of your ability. That is something you should be doing. But not to extend your life for 200 years or to become immortal. That is foolish. You should not be doing that. Back to the text. However strange it may seem, it is the second or destructive activity that is, with rare exception, the cause of all disease. The waste material accumulates and saturates the tissues, which causes auto-intoxication. This may be partial or general. In the first case, the disturbance will be local. In the second place, it will affect the whole system. This is in part true, right? I am not a biologist, so I cannot give you the entirety of the breakdown on how waste is accumulated and eliminated, and this can be partly true, right? The body gets less efficient at that as it ages. There are more waste to be had as your body degrades. So, yeah, but not everything is caused by that. The problem then before us in the healing of disease is to increase the inflow and distribution of vital energy throughout the system. And this can only be done by eliminating thoughts of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, hatred, and every other destructive thought, which tend to tear down and destroy the nerves and glands, which control the excretion and elimination of poisonous and waste matter. And this is true, right? There are 7 internal chakras and 1 external chakra, and you should be moving your energy, right? The distribution of vital energy throughout the system is part of the process. That is how I have manifested change in my own life. That is how I have healed my throat from the cyst that used to be there. It is how I now have 100% functionality in this shoulder that I only had 80% in for 2 decades. It is how I am affecting change in other places that I cannot quite tell you about yet. That is true. You should be doing that. You should be moving the energy. I have a whole playlist, the Infinite Integrations playlist, where we talk about that in extreme detail, so we're not going to here, even though we have several times through this particular playlist, right? The Master Key has its own playlist. It's part of Esoterica. It's part, and you can go back and watch. We've talked about it several times just in this. So if this is your first video, here's a clue. I have healed myself. It is through the power of God, but it has happened. It was in part through eliminating thoughts of fear, worry, care, anxiety, jealousy, and hatred. That is part of the prayer, fasting, and meditative process. That is where you come to grips with that. That is how you deal with that. Again, we have gone through that in extensive detail in the Infinite Integrations playlist, so I'm not really going to do that again here, but yes. Now, do I think that he had the full grip of it? I don't, but that's okay. Nourishing foods and strengthening tonics cannot bestow life because these are but secondary manifestations of life. The primary manifestation of life and how you may get in touch with it is explained in Part 22. Let's go. Part 22. Knowledge is of priceless value because by applying knowledge we can make our future what we wish it to be. When we realize that our present character, our present environment, our present ability, our present physical condition are all the result of past methods of thinking, we shall begin to have some conception of the value of knowledge. And that is mostly true, right? That is almost entirely true. Now, there are external influences. There are what I call the bottlenecks. You are here to learn lessons. Sometimes those lessons are pleasant. Sometimes those lessons are unpleasant, but you're here to learn them regardless. When you come upon a lesson, that is not necessarily part of you, right? You didn't necessarily manifest that. That was something that you agreed to before you got here, at least in my estimation. I believe that we were somewheres prior to being here, and we will be somewheres after here. It is the soul is eternal. We've already hit that. I believe that when we were somewheres prior to being here, we met, we talked, we came to an agreement. I was going to teach you something, and you are going to teach me something. And that is true for every single interaction with every single person that you have ever met in your entire life. Some people teach you good lessons, some people teach you bad lessons, but the lessons were agreed to prior to being here. That doesn't make it your fault, right? Sometimes the lessons are lessons of resistance, and sometimes the people who are meant to learn the lessons of resistance don't. And so bad things happen. That is, in a nutshell, things that we talk about again in the Infinite Integrations playlist in more detail. So, while most of your conditions are affected by you, by your thoughts, not all of them will be. If you have ever acted outside of your character, right? Somebody said something and it tripped you off, and you acted outside of the way that you normally do with no real control. That was part of that. That was you acting your part in their lesson, or learning your own. That is part of the process, right? That has happened to me several times. I'm sure it's happened to you too. You have done something completely out of character, something that you would not normally do. That is a bottleneck. There are greater bottlenecks and there are lesser bottlenecks. Sometimes when you flare up at somebody, that is a lesser bottleneck. Some of the greater events that happen in the world are bigger bottlenecks. World War I, World War II, as examples. Those were bottlenecks for humanity writ large. Some of those contained bottlenecks of smaller stature, so individual battles, individual choices made in the battles. Those were part of the bottleneck too. But the bottleneck exists, external from you. Nobody manifested the war. That was something that was meant for humanity to experience, to learn from, and to get over. Now, we didn't really do the learn from part. Since World War II, we have been in pretty much a continuous state of battle somewheres. We didn't really learn that lesson. We still have that lesson to learn, and so we're still getting the bottlenecks. All right, back to the text. If the state of our health is not all that it could be, that all that could be desired, let us examine our method of thinking. Let us remember that every thought produces an impression on the mind. Every impression is a seed which will sink into the subconscious and form a tendency. The tendency will be to attract others' similar thoughts, and before we know it, we shall have a crop which must be harvested. That is true. If you are focusing on the positive, you will reap the positive. If you are focusing on the negative, you will reap the negative outside of the bottlenecks. If these thoughts contain disease germs, the harvest will be sickness, decay, weakness, and failure. The question is, what are we thinking? What are we creating? What is the harvest to be? If there is any physical condition, which it is necessary to change, the law governing visualization will be found effective. Make a mental image of physical perfection. Hold it in the mind until it is absorbed by the consciousness. Many have eliminated chronic ailments in a few weeks by this method, and thousands have overcome and destroyed all manner of ordinary physical disturbances by this method in a few days, sometimes in a few minutes. And here's where I get to apply my practical knowledge. I've hit on it already that I have affected healing in my life. I had a cyst that pushed on my throat. It was not possible for me to speak in the lower range of my voice at all, and even in my higher range, short, like very short periods of time. There was no point in time during this time that I could speak to anyone 5 feet away and them hear me. It was basically a whisper. I have affected change in that. It is through prayer, fasting, and meditation. It is through directing the energy through the chakras. It has been by conceptualizing the healing. Now, I say conceptualizing because if this is your first video, I haven't been able to visualize anything for the entirety of my life. Up until a few weeks ago, I wasn't even able to change colors. I wasn't able to visualize color. I'd never seen a color when I closed my eyes up until a few weeks ago. That is something that I am healing too, but even without being able to see, I was able to do. I was able to hold the concept of healing, even if I didn't have a vision in my mind of perfect health. I wasn't able to see my body and make it perfect, but I was able to take this lump out of my throat by moving the energy where it needed to be and concentrating on the healing that needed to happen. That I did. It happened. It worked. It was not a couple of weeks. It took a couple of months. It was not a pain-free process. Sometimes it hurt, but it happened. I did the same thing with my shoulder unintentionally. I was working on something else. I moved the energy to my chest, and I was like, okay, let's heal some things, because if you don't know, I have a bunch of problems. And it healed, but it was not apparent that that's what happened at first, right? I didn't even know what was going on. I had had surgery on this shoulder 20 years ago. I only had 80% functionality. I couldn't even move my arm like this. A couple of months ago actually, that changed. Something happened and it hurt. It hurt severely for several weeks. It was something that was concerning. But I continued doing what I was doing, and now I have 100% functionality in my shoulder. It was healed. I have affected this change. When I talk about these things, it is not just me reading about it. It is something I have done. It is through the power of the Holy Spirit, so don't get it twisted, but it is true. It is something that has happened. Now, this few minutes, I don't discount that, right? When it happened, it was gradually and then all of a sudden. And this thing in my throat, it was gradual, and then all of a sudden it was gone. One day I woke up and it wasn't there. The thing with my shoulder, it hurt for several weeks, and then one day it was gone, and it was like it never happened. So it does happen in a few minutes, sometimes depending on what it is. Most of the time it is going to take more time than that. You cannot pull something from nothing. That is one of the 8 laws of creation. And so there has to be something invested in order to receive a return, and until the proper amount is invested, the return will not come. Sometimes it can be a few minutes, but don't expect that. Don't expect to just materialize an apple in your hand. That is almost certainly not going to happen. I don't discount it. Things do happen. I have seen some wild things. But for the most part, what is going to happen is you're going to run into somebody with an apple to give you. That is how you manifested it. It is through the law of vibration that the mind exercises this control over the body. And again, the law of vibration is almost certainly going to be the law of momentum. And we know that all form is simply a mode of motion, a rate of vibration. Therefore, any given vibration immediately modifies every atom in the body. Every life cell is affected, and an entire chemical change is made in every group of life cells. This is probably true, right? I talk often about raising your vibratory levels. I don't know that I've done that at all in this study, but you operate on a frequency. Everything is a frequency. That is one of the laws, right? The law of rhythm and the law of momentum in a different way. And so your frequency determines where you are. If you are working on a low vibratory frequency, you're going to receive the low results. If you are operating on a high vibratory frequency, you're going to receive those results. So part of mental alchemy is changing your frequency from lower to upper. That is part of the mechanics of how it works. Everything in the universe is what it is by virtue of its rate of vibration. Yeah. Change the rate of vibration and you change the nature, quality, and form. The vast panorama of nature, both visible and invisible, is being constantly changed by simply changing the rate of vibration. And, as thought is a vibration, we can also exercise this power. We can change the vibration and thus produce any condition which we desire to manifest in our bodies. As long as it was within the scope, right? This is another part that he leaves out. Sometimes you are meant to be sick. Sometimes you are meant to be injured. Sometimes it is not within the scope of the lesson for you to be healed. Sometimes it requires you to learn the lesson before the healing can come, and sometimes it's just never going to come. When Jesus said, if it be within the will of the Father, that is why. It is only if it is within the will that it can happen. There can be no manifestation outside of the will, positive or negative. Now, you have a large scope of control over that, but there are some things that are outside of your scope of control, and you need to keep that in mind. It is vitally important to understand that. You have to be able to accept the no and the not yet, right? Sometimes the answer is yes. That's an easy one. Everybody likes that one. Sometimes the answer is no, and they don't like that one as much. But sometimes the answer is not now. It's not yet. It is in a little while. There is still something to be done. There is still investment to be made. There is still a lesson to be learned. That is a really hard one to understand, because you're like, this is correct. I know it's correct. That means that there's still something left to do. So you have to be able to accept yes, no, and not now. If you can't do that, don't even try to manifest. You will mess it up. We are all using this power every minute. The trouble is, most of us are using it unconsciously and thus producing undesirable results. The problem is to use it intelligently and produce only desirable results. This should not be difficult because we have all had sufficient experience to know what produces pleasant vibration in the body. We also know the causes which produce the unpleasant and disagreeable sensations. That is mostly true, but a lot of people are unaware. And it is not necessarily pleasure that is going to raise your vibratory patterns. All that is necessary is to consult our own experience. When our thought has been uplifted, progressive, constructive, courageous, noble, kind, or in any other way desirable, we have set in motion vibrations which brought about certain results. When our thought has been filled with envy, hatred, jealousy, criticism, or any of the other 1,001 forms of discord, certain vibrations were set in motion which brought about certain other results of a different nature. And each of these rates of vibration, if kept up, crystallized in form. It is in the first case the result was mental, moral, and physical health, and in the second case, discord, inharmony, and disease. And again, that is in large part true. We can understand, then, something of the power which the mind possesses over the body. The objective mind has certain effects on the body which are readily recognized. Someone says something to you which strikes you as ludicrous, and you laugh, possibly until your whole body shakes, which shows that thought has control over the muscles of your body. Or someone says something which excites your sympathy and your eyes fill with tears, which shows that thought controls the glands of the body. Or someone says something which makes you angry and the blood mounts to your cheek, which shows that thought controls the circulation of your blood. But as these experiences are all the results of the action of your objective mind over the body, the results are of a temporary nature. They soon pass away and leave the situation as it was before. Now, anger is generally not an objective decision. Right? Laughter, generally not an objective decision. Sorrow, generally not an objective decision. You don't decide to be sad. You don't decide to be overcome with mirth. It is something that happens to you that is more of a subjective than objective mind. I don't know why he even put it that way. Let us see how the action of the subconscious mind over the body differs. You receive a wound. Thousands of cells begin the work of healing at once. In a few days or a few weeks, the work is complete. You may even break a bone. No surgeon on earth can weld the parts together. He may set the bone for you, and the subjective mind will immediately begin the process of welding the parts together. And in a short time, the bone is as solid as it ever was. You may swallow poison. The subjective mind will immediately discover the danger and make violent efforts to eliminate it. You may become infected with a dangerous germ. The subjective will at once commence to build a wall around the infected area and destroy the infection by absorbing it in the white blood corpuscles, which it supplies for the purpose. And that is, The processes of the subconscious mind usually proceed without our personal knowledge or direction, and so long as we do not interfere, the result is perfect. But as these millions of repair cells are all intelligent and respond to our thought, they are often paralyzed and rendered impotent by our thoughts of fear, doubt, and anxiety. They are like an army of workmen ready to start an important piece of work, but every time they get fairly started on the undertaking, a strike is called or plans changed, until they finally get discouraged and give up. You can keep yourself from healing, so yes. The way to health is founded on the law of vibration, which is the basis of all science, and this law is brought into operation by the mind, the world within. It is a matter of individual effort and practice. Our world of power is within. If we are wise, we shall not waste time and effort in trying to deal with effects as we find them in the world without, which is only an external, a reflection. We shall always find the cause in the world within. By changing the cause, we change the effect. And again, that is with the caveat that some things are bottlenecks and you don't have any control over that. Now, you get to control your reaction to that. You don't get to control whether or not it happens. Every cell in your body is intelligent and will respond to your direction. The cells are all creators and will create the exact pattern which you give them. Therefore, when perfect images are placed before the subjective, the creative energies will build a perfect body. And again, you will not ever have a perfect body. Brain cells are constructed in the same way. The quality of the brain is governed by the state of mind or mental attitude, so that if undesirable mental attitudes are conveyed to the subjective, they will in turn be transferred to the body. We can therefore readily see that we wish the body to manifest health, strength, and vitality. This must be the predominant thought. You get what you focus upon. We know then that every element of the human body is the result of a rate of vibration. We know that mental action is a rate of vibration. We know that a higher rate of vibration governs, modifies, controls, changes, or destroys a lower rate of vibration. That is mostly true, all three of those. We know that the rate of vibration is governed by the character of brain cells. And finally, we know how to create these brain cells. That is something I've already talked about, and I don't necessarily agree with. Therefore, we know how to make any physical change in the body we desire, and having secured a working knowledge of the power of mind to this extent, we have come to know that there is practically no limitation which can be placed upon our ability to place ourselves in harmony with natural law, which is omnipotent. This influence, or control over the body by the mind, is coming to be more and more generally understood, and many physicians are now giving the matter their earnest attention. Dr. Albert T. Schofield, who has written several important books on the subject, says, "The subject of mental therapeutics is still ignored by medical works generally. In our physiologies, no reference is made to the central controlling power that rules the body for its good, and the power of the mind over the body is seldom spoken of. No doubt many physicians treat nervous diseases of functional origin wisely and well, but what we contend is that the knowledge they display was taught in no school, was learned from no book, but is intuitive and empirical. This is not as it should be. The power of mental therapeutics should act the subjects to be careful, special, and scientific teaching in every medical school. We might pursue the subject of maltreatment or want of treatment further in detail and describe the disastrous effects of neglected cases, but the task is an invidious one. There can be no doubt that few patients are aware of how much they can do for themselves. What the patient can do for himself, what forces he can set in motion are as yet unknown. We are inclined to believe that they are far greater than most imagine and will undoubtedly be used more and more. Mental therapeutics may be directed by the patient himself to calming the mind in excitement, by arousing feelings of joy, hope, faith, and love, by suggesting motives for exertion, by regular mental work, by diverting the thoughts from the malady." I don't disagree with that in large part, right? Like, you do have a lot of control. You don't even understand how much control you have. I'm still working on that, and I have affected it. I have done it. And so most people have no clue. For your next exercise, concentrate on Tennyson's beautiful lines. Speak to him, thou, for he hears, and spirit with spirit can meet. Closer is he than breathing, and nearer than the hands and feet. Then try to realize that when you do speak to him, you are in touch with omnipotence. That is prayer, fasting, and meditation. This realization and recognition of this omnipresent power will quickly destroy any and every form of sickness or suffering and substitute harmony and perfection, again with the caveat that some things are outside of your control. Then remember there are those who seem to think that sickness and suffering are sent by God. If so, every physician, every surgeon, and every Red Cross nurse is defying the will of God, and hospitals and sanatoriums are places of rebellion instead of houses of mercy. Of course, this quickly reasons itself into absurdity, but there are many who still cherish the idea. And again, there are lessons to be learned. Some of those lessons are terrible. Having cancer is not a great lesson, but it is a lesson. And that's not necessarily placing it, oh, well, God says, right? That is something that it must happen for another reason. Somebody else has to learn grief. Then let the thought rest on the fact that until recently, theology has been trying to teach an impossible creator, one who created beings capable of sinning and then allowed them to be eternally punished for such sins. See the Unconventional Bible Study. Of course, the necessary outcome of such extraordinary ignorance was to create fear instead of love. And so, after 2,000 years of this kind of propaganda, theology is now busily engaging in apologizing for Christendom. I refer you to the Bible Study because I have put in the work once again for you. You can do it for yourself, but I have for you. There are a myriad of reasons not to believe the current control systems, which are regular theology. Right? In the entirety of the Old Testament, there is no hell. None. There was no concept of it. There was a place where you went when you died. There was no eternal lake of fire burning forever. There was no eternal damnation and punishment anywheres in the book. Until you get to the New Testament, when that new idea suddenly appeared from somewhere and they decided to make it happen. There is not objectively in the book that you can, for yourself, create that. We've talked before about discontent spirits and how you can hold on to the point where you are creating a reality outside of what should be. You can create your own hell. If you are firmly entrenched in that idea, then that is what's going to happen, kinda, for you. But not necessarily that you're going to interact with anyone else. You largely create that result by separating yourself from the source. You make the choice at the end to remain, and that creates the problem. I quit doing the apologizing, right? That was what I started the Bible study just taking off the lens of divine determination and necessary sacrifice. And by doing that and just reading it objectively, it led me away from apologizing for it completely. And quite often in the opposite direction. You will then more readily appreciate the ideal man, the man made in the image and likeness of God, and you will the more readily appreciate all the originating mind that forms, upholds, sustains, originates, and creates all there is. All are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God, the soul. Pope. Opportunity follows perception, action follows inspiration, growth follows knowledge, imminence follows progress. Always the spiritual first, then the transformation into the infinite and illimitable possibilities of achievement. Part 22 questions. How may sickness be eliminated? By placing ourselves in harmony with natural law, which is omnipotent. What is the process? A realization that man is a spiritual being and that the spirit must necessarily be perfect. That was not what we read, but it is also not entirely true, right? There is a process. I have outlined it. It involves prayer, fasting, and meditation. It does come from a realization of spirituality, and it does come from accepting the higher authority. That is true. There are extra steps. You have to direct the energy into the result that you want. You have to invest that. If you're not investing that, then the returns don't come. That is one of the laws of creation. What is the result? A conscious recognition of this perfection, first intellectually, then emotionally, brings about a manifestation of this perfection. Why is this so? Because thought is spiritual and therefore creative and correlates with its object and brings it into manifestation. What natural law is brought into operation? The law of vibration. Why does this govern? Because a higher rate of vibration governs, modifies, controls, changes, or destroys a lower rate of vibration. Is this system of mental therapeutics generally recognized? Yes, there are several million people in the world who make use of it in one form or another. What is the result of this system of thought? For the first time in the world's history, every man's highest reasoning faculty can be satisfied by a demonstrable truth, which is now fast flooding the world. Is this system applicable to other forms of supply? It will meet every human requirement or necessity. Is this system scientific or religious? Both. True science and true religion are twin sisters. Where one goes, the other necessarily follows. Silent thought is, after all, the mightiest agent in human affairs. Channing. And that is going to bring us to the end of our exploration of Chapter 22. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs and that I have a tendency to step on toes whenever I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. The process by which I have come to these realizations has been a long one. It has not been entirely pleasant. I had to break apart several of my own thought patterns and the things that I thought were true. Part of that was the unconventional Bible study. When I went through there, it showed me where I had been wrong. Most people don't have the willingness to take off those glasses, to understand that God can choose a person, but he doesn't choose people. That is a big, big one. The fact that whenever blood was required, it was the wrong thing every single time. That's another big, big one. That is something that it took me going through the process to understand. That's why I point out the system, the study so often. I have 161 videos in that playlist where I went through step by step. We went through almost the entirety of the Old Testament. We went through all of the prophecies. We went through the things that were important to the understanding. It was not every single verse in the Bible, but it was most of them. It was not every single person, right? We left Paul alone for a whole reason. But through that process, I came to a greater understanding. I came to understand God in the fundamental way, without the intermediary being necessary. And that is when the effects started happening. When I did the Bible study and started putting into practice the things that I learned from it, that's when I was able to affect the change in my throat. I had the lump the whole time we did the Bible study, all the way through. It wasn't until after that, when I started doing the things that we talk about here, that I was able to affect the change in myself. That is something that even when I began it, I didn't really believe it, right? I thought, well, I'll try this out and see how it works, and it works. And so I am relaying it. That's why I'm giving this information away, so that you can affect the change in your life. I didn't like not being able to talk. I hated it. I hated not being able to sing. I hated it. That was a negative effect of a bottleneck. Until I could learn something new and break that thought pattern, I was stuck. Once I broke that thought pattern and was able to change my vibratory rate intentionally, I was able to affect change in my life, and it is still continuing. I am still getting better every single day, and it is a wonderful thing. I give thanks to God every single day for that. Right? God is the single fundamental driving force for everything I do, and that's not necessarily your concept of God. And you may be upset with me for the things that I say here, and I understand that. It can be difficult to learn new things. I'm trying to relay a fundamental thing. Right? We are all here for a purpose. God created you for a purpose. You are here to accomplish something. And it can be something that you might consider insignificant. It can be raising a child who will do something great and you don't know it. It can be saying the right thing to someone in passing that completely changes their life. That can be your purpose. That doesn't mean it's the only one you have. I'm sure there's a myriad of them for all of us. There are different lessons for all of us. We have to learn them. We have to learn to identify them. And it is through that process that you get better. Through prayer, fasting, and meditation. Those are intrinsic. You don't get away from this without those. Without doing that, there is no possibility of change. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree. As long as it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work along these lines that you would like to see me do, leave it down below. I am making a list. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.